The ranger had seen many strange things in Oregon's dense forests, but nothing prepared him for this. It was 6:47 a.m. when he radioed in, his voice trembling. "Dispatch, the tent's still warm." Those were the only words he managed before the signal cut out. The story begins 8 years earlier, in the summer of 2016, when the Callahan family, Mark, his wife Leah, and their 2 children, Owen and Grace, packed their camper and drove into Crater Lake National Park for a weekend of hiking and fishing. They were ordinary people, loved by their neighbors, known for their laughter. By all accounts, nothing about them hinted at the nightmare that was coming. They checked in at the Visitors Lodge on July 9th. Park records confirmed their campsite at a remote clearing known as Deadwood Hollow. The name was an old logging term, but locals whispered that it had another meaning: the place where the woods never forgot. The family was last seen around sunset by a passing hiker who noticed the smell of roasting food and the sound of a guitar playing softly by the fire. By morning, they were gone. The campsite was found abandoned, food still on plates, sleeping bags unrolled, and a half-written postcard on the picnic table that simply read, "Wish you were here. It's beautiful, almost too quiet." Search teams combed the forest for weeks. Bloodhounds lost the scent just 300 feet from the tent, as though the family had vanished into thin air. No footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, no remains. Then the forest grew silent about them, until 8 years later. Ranger Eli Turner was on a solo patrol after reports of flickering lights deep inside Deadwood Hollow. The site had long been closed to campers after a series of disappearances. When he reached the clearing, the old Callahan tent was there, faded but intact. At first, he thought someone had set it up as a prank. But when he touched the canvas, it was warm. Inside were 4 sleeping bags, all zipped. Steam rose from a half-eaten meal still on the camp stove, fresh. The air smelled faintly of pine and smoke, like the fire had just been put out minutes ago. But there was no one there. Then he noticed something worse. A family photo lay by the entrance, the Callahans smiling, but their eyes looked different. In the original case file photo, their eyes were blue. In this one, the same picture, printed anew, their eyes were black. Eli's breathing grew shallow. His radio crackled, whispering faintly with static, and then a voice that wasn't dispatch. "You're late." He turned toward the woods, flashlight shaking, as a child's laugh echoed faintly through the trees. The same voice from an 8-year-old missing since 2016. The story of what Ranger Turner found next would never make it into official reports. But those who've entered Deadwood Hollow since say they sometimes see a warm light through the trees and hear 4 voices humming an old campfire song. When dawn broke over Crater Lake, the campsite looked ordinary at first glance. The family's tent stood neatly zipped, their cooler still filled with half-melted ice, and a campfire lay smoldering in its pit, as if someone had just stepped away for a walk. But when Ranger Thomas Beck unzipped that tent, everything changed. Inside were 3 sleeping bags, perfectly laid out. One contained a wallet and car keys. Another held a small teddy bear with one missing button eye. The third, empty, cold, and slightly unzipped, was smeared with what looked like dried mud. Beck froze. Something about the air felt off, too still. Even the birds seemed to have left this part of the forest. He radioed in the find. Within hours, local deputies and search teams swarmed the area. They expected a simple case, maybe a lost trail, maybe a family gone astray. But the investigation quickly turned bizarre. The Wilsons, Daniel, Laura, and their 10-year-old son, Evan, had checked into the ranger station 8 years ago. They were assigned to this exact site, Campsite 19A. But records showed something unsettling. That same site had been closed the following week due to unusual activity. No ranger, no report, no explanation. As the investigators combed the area, they found the Wilsons' SUV parked not far away, hidden behind a curtain of pine trees. The engine was long dead, but the keys were still in the ignition. In the back seat sat a single grocery bag with a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a bottle of water, all dated 2017. The expiration dates were long past, yet when Beck touched the items, the bread crumbled like it had just gone stale yesterday. It made no sense. The forensic team later confirmed that the food was somehow only days old in chemical composition. Impossible unless time itself had done something strange in that forest. The locals began to talk again. Old stories about the Blue Silence, a stretch of the Oregon woods where compasses spun and voices echoed where there should be none. It was said that once every decade, the forest swallowed something or someone whole. Beck didn't believe in ghost stories, but that night, as he stood by the Wilsons' tent under the silver moonlight, he thought he heard something behind him, faint, like a child's laughter carried by the wind. He turned, flashlight trembling in his grip, scanning the trees. Nothing but shadows and pine needles. Still, when he looked back, something inside the tent had changed. The teddy bear, the one with the missing eye, was no longer where he had left it. It was sitting upright now, facing him, and though he could swear it was impossible, its single glass eye reflected the beam of his flashlight, like it was watching him. Ranger Beck barely slept that night. Every sound outside his cabin, the rustle of pine needles, the distant hoot of an owl, made his skin crawl. The teddy bear incident had shaken him more than he cared to admit. He tried convincing himself it was exhaustion or nerves, but deep down, he knew something wasn't right. By sunrise, the search team returned. They began a full-scale sweep of the surrounding woods, covering nearly 10 miles in every direction from campsite 19A. Cadaver dogs sniffed the area, but each time they got close to the tent, they started whimpering and pulling back, tails between their legs. One dog even broke free from its handler and sprinted toward the tree lean, whining like it had seen something it couldn't comprehend. When they finally coaxed the animal back, its nose was bleeding. The team pressed on. About 200 yards east of the campsite, they discovered something peculiar. A small clearing surrounded by fir trees twisted unnaturally, their trunks bent inward, almost like they were leaning to watch the center. In that clearing, the earth was scorched black in a perfect circle. No lightning strikes, no campfires, no footprints, just dead silence and burnt ground. Deputy Mills muttered, like a UFO landing site, trying to lighten the tension. No one laughed. Later that afternoon, Beck returned to the ranger station to check the old logbooks. Something about that unusual activity, note from 8 years ago, gnawed at him. He rummaged through dusty filing cabinets until he found the handwritten entry, dated July 14th, 2017, the same week the Wilsons had vanished. The entry was brief, almost hurried. 19A closed until further notice. Disturbance reported at 2:46 a.m. Unexplained lights. Missing persons. Do not reopen. No signature. No follow-up report. Nothing. Beck leaned back in his chair, staring at the words. Unexplained lights. Just then, the power in the station flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out completely. He cursed, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped outside to check the generator. But before he could reach it, he saw it. A faint glow pulsing through the trees toward the campsite. It wasn't fire. It wasn't a lantern. It was blue. Without thinking, he started walking toward it. Each step felt heavier than the last, the forest air thick like molasses. His ears filled with a low hum, deep and rhythmic, like the forest itself was breathing. When he reached the clearing, the glow vanished. Total darkness. Then a whisper, close, too close. A child's voice. "Mister, we're still here." Beck spun around, flashlight shaking wildly, but there was no one there. Only the burnt circle, now faintly steaming as if something hot had just left it. Heart pounding, he ran back to the ranger station, locked the door, and sat motionless till dawn. He didn't report what he saw. Not yet, because part of him feared the truth, that the Wilson family never left campsite 19A. They might still be there, just not in this time. The next morning, the sun barely filtered through the Oregon mist. Ranger Beck looked like he hadn't slept in days. His coffee sat untouched, his hands trembling slightly as he replayed the night in his mind. The whisper, the child's voice, was too real to dismiss. But he knew no one would believe him without proof. Around noon, Deputy Mills returned from the site with an evidence bag. Inside, it was an old handheld camcorder, half buried near the burnt clearing. The casing was scratched and covered in moss, but the SD card inside looked surprisingly intact. "Found it next to the roots," Mills said. "Could be from the Wilsons." Beck's pulse quickened. The Wilsons' disappearance had been one of Oregon's coldest unsolved cases. If this camera belonged to them, it could finally reveal what happened that night. He plugged the card into his laptop, the device humming to life as the files appeared, all dated July 13th and 14th, 2017. He clicked the first one. The screen flickered, and a family appeared. Robert and Emily Wilson, both in their 30s, laughing as they roasted marshmallows with their 2 children, Lily and Thomas. The scene was normal, heartwarming even. Beck found himself smiling faintly as he watched them wave at the camera. But the next clip, recorded around 2 a.m., was different. The camera shook violently, the lens filled with darkness and frantic breathing. Emily's voice whispered, "Rob, do you see that?" A distant humming sound filled the background, deep and rhythmic, just like the one Beck heard last night. Then the tent's fabric glowed blue, light bleeding through the seams. The children started crying. "It's okay, it's probably just..." Robert's voice cut off as the tent zipper ripped open on its own. The camera tilted toward the entrance, revealing something. A tall, featureless silhouette backlit by blue light. It wasn't human. Its outline flickered, as if reality struggled to contain it. Emily screamed. The screen went black. Beck froze, sweat dripping down his temple. He exhaled shakily and opened the next video file. Timestamp 2:47 a.m. The camera was on the ground now, half covered in dirt. The angle pointed toward the tent, which was now empty and fluttering in the breeze. But in the background, through the trees, 4 figures could be seen walking into the forest. Slowly, in perfect unison, Beck paused the video, zooming in on their faces. They weren't walking. Their feet weren't touching the ground. A cold chill gripped his spine. He looked at Deputy Mills, who was staring silently at the screen, mouth slightly open. "That tent," Mills whispered. "When we found it, it was still warm." The laptop suddenly froze. The screen turned black, and a faint voice began playing through the speakers. A child's voice, familiar and small. "Mister, we're still here." The same words Beck heard in the woods. The same voice. And when he looked back at the evidence bag, the camcorder's red light had turned on, recording. The following day, the Oregon State Police authorized a second sweep of the campsite. Ranger Beck and Deputy Mills insisted on returning, despite the eerie events of the night before. Beck couldn't shake the voice, nor the image of the Wilsons walking, floating into the woods. Something about the footage gnawed at his mind. The forest felt alive, as if it had been waiting for them to come back. The morning fog was thick enough to blur the treetops, and the world seemed muted. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of boots on damp soil. Beck led the way, the old trail camera in his backpack, and a handheld radio clipped to his vest. They reached the clearing around 9:40 a.m. The tent was still there, still upright, still impossibly intact after all these years. Deputy Mills frowned. "You sure they didn't move this thing for evidence?" "Positive," Beck replied, scanning the area. "No one's been here since last night." But something was different. The ground around the tent looked disturbed, as if someone had been digging. Shallow impressions, footprints, circled the camp. Small ones, barefoot, children, Mills muttered, crouching. Same size as. He didn't finish. From the tree-line came a faint hum, deep, resonant, the same sound from the recording. It vibrated through their chests, through the soil beneath their feet. Beck turned, flashlight in hand, but the fog thickened instantly, swallowing the forest hole. "Mills," he called. "Stay close." No answer. He turned again, the beam of his flashlight slicing through the mist. For a brief moment, he caught a glimpse of something, a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. A woman, long hair, pale, her eyes hollow. "Emily Wilson?" Beck whispered. The figure tilted her head. The hum grew louder, pulsing through the trees. Beck stumbled backward as the tent flap lifted on its own, and the cold air that spilled out smelled like earth and decay. The camcorder in his bag clicked on by itself, its tiny red light blinking. The radio on his vest crackled. "Ranger Beck, do you copy? This is dispatch. You're breaking up. Can you confirm your location?" He raised the radio to respond, but before he could speak, a child's giggle echoed directly behind him. Beck spun around, light trembling in his hand, and there they were. Two children, standing barefoot in the mud. Their clothes were from another time, torn and dirty. Their skin was pale as ash. "We told you we were still here," the little boy said softly. The fog surged forward like a living thing, swallowing everything. The trees, the tent, the children. The radio went silent. The last thing dispatch recorded was Beck's voice whispering, "Oh God, they're not human." Hours later, a search team arrived at the site. They found Beck's radio lying near the tent, still on. The camcorder was recording. The tent was warm, but Beck and Mills were gone, just like the Wilson family. When dawn broke the next day, the rescue team that entered the Wilsons' campsite found the air unnaturally still. Every sound, every whisper of wind, seemed swallowed by the forest itself. The trees leaned inward as though they were listening. Ranger Beck and Deputy Mills had vanished without a trace. Only their footprints, abruptly cut off in the mud, remained near the tent. Detective Laura Kincaid led the follow-up investigation. She was a skeptic, known for dismantling every supernatural report that came her way. But this one was different. When she arrived, she noticed it immediately. The air temperature dropped as she stepped into the clearing. "It's like walking into a vacuum," she muttered. Her partner, Officer Ramirez, was filming the site for documentation. "Tent still warm," he said, crouching. "No wildlife damage. It's like someone just stepped out." Laura knelt by the flap. Inside, 3 sleeping bags were laid out neatly. A lantern glowed faintly, though no one had touched it. She felt its glass. It was hot. Her breath caught. "Ramirez, this is impossible. This lantern hasn't had fuel for years." He was about to respond when his radio crackled, static at first, then a faint voice. "Beck to base. I found them." Ramirez froze. "Did you hear that?" Laura's blood ran cold. Beck's radio had been recovered hours earlier. She snatched her own radio. "Beck, this is Detective Kincaid. Repeat, what did you find?" Silence. Then faintly breathing. Slow, wet, labored. She turned sharply toward the trees, the fog coiling tighter around them. And there, half hidden between the trunks, were figures, motionless, watching. At first, she thought they were mannequins or shadows. But as the fog shifted, she saw them clearly. The Wilson family, their faces pale and bloated, as if preserved underwater. Their eyes open wide, their mouths slightly parted. And just behind them, Beck and Mill stood side by side, their faces blank, their eyes glowing faintly with the same dim amber light as the lantern. Laura stumbled back, clutching her radio. "This can't be real, Ramirez, we need to." But Ramirez was gone. His camera lay on the ground, still recording. The screen flickered, showing Laura's panicked face, then abruptly shifted, showing her now standing alone in the clearing, the tent behind her zipped shut. The footage ends there. When another search team arrived 3 hours later, there was no sign of Laura, Ramirez, Beck, or Mills. The forest was silent again, but the tent still warm. The lantern still glowing. And the camera? It kept recording for 43 more minutes after everyone was gone. During those final minutes, faint voices can be heard on the audio. A woman softly humming, a child laughing, and then 5 distinct words whispered through the static. "The forest never lets go." Authorities closed the investigation, labeling it a tragic disappearance. But the rangers who still patrol that part of Oregon say sometimes in the fog, you can see the faint light of a lantern flickering deep among the trees. And if you listen closely, just before dawn, you might hear a child's voice whispering from the mist. We're still here. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel using the link below.